Athletor Podcast. Frank Molinaro's on this today. I'm so excited, dude. We've been trying to lock you down for a minute, man. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thanks, man.
Okay, first things first. You have now, you've had a couple coaching jobs. You went back to competing again. You've settled in to Tempe. Tell me what is different about life out west compared to life on the East Coast, or even, oh wow. Always a pleasure. Tell me what's different about life out west as opposed to life you grew up on the East Coast, you went to school in Pennsylvania, you had a job at Virginia Tech, and you were in the Midwest at OU. So tell me what's different about life on the west side.
So, just for starters, I'm always proud of, being born and raised on the East Coast. I think some of the characteristics I picked up on the East Coast, just being really tough. The competition was always super tough. So many tough tournaments, clubs, states was hard, all that stuff. And, just had good coaching too. Lots of really high level coaches up and down the East Coast. And then, on the West Coast, some of the benefits are Greater Phoenix metropolitan area. We're right by one of the biggest cities, fastest growing cities in the whole country. So with that comes tons of resources, medical resources, athletic, pretty much anything that's like cutting edge, or you can have an advantage with sports science, recovery, etc. People are doing it out here. Lots of UFC fighters are training out in the West Coast. It's a good quality of life. It's basically sunny for 300 plus days a year, and it doesn't get any cooler than about 50 degrees. So the average temperature is for 9 months, it's perfect. And then for 3 months, it's too hot. So training wise, you can train, indoor, outdoor, year round. I think also the people I found have been super nice out on the West Coast. People are just kind of laid back, and there's a little bit more spread out. So
yeah. No, I would tend to agree with that. The weather here does not suck. Does not suck. I could not go back.
Bad. Yeah, it's not bad, right?
I could not go back to shoveling snow ever. I couldn't do it.
It's a tough life.
It's a tough go. All right, you mentioned recovery. I'm finding that when you were growing up, you were kind of at the tail end of the I'm gonna run through a wall type of training. It was starting to get a little smarter, but there was still a lot of knucklehead coaches out there telling you to run through walls. Less has become much more, especially in the last 10 to 15 years. How different is the way that you train your guys at ASU from the way that you trained, let's say, at Penn State?
That's a good question. I think it's constantly evolving and kind of recalculating and calibrating it, but I tend to be more carefully planned and make sure that, once I know the ending before the beginning, then you just start to plan backwards, and and you use a system. And when you have a system like periodization, you kind of have a peak, and you have a couple markers where you test yourself and have a couple small peaks. But without going into too much detail of it, you perform really best when it matters the most. So I feel like however the training can safely, without injury, get you to that finish line and that ending where you feel I'm the fastest in my training and I'm the strongest I've been in my training, and I'm emotionally fresh and mentally prepared. So, in the beginning of the season, I'm just focusing on getting my conditioning up, getting my cardiovascular, because this pumps all the blood to my muscles. Then I'm building a base level of strength before I get into some of the heavier strength training. And then eventually it transitions into in-season lifting. And then it transitions into some circuit training, sports specific, and then really fast stuff at the end. And then bam, you're right into those competitions and you feel fresh. So with that, you have to have the right volume, you have to have the right intensity, you have to have the right system to be able to do that. I think if you just go by what you're feeling that day, like heck no, that's
Yeah.
not, you got to have the minutes calculated. I'm not saying that it doesn't change. It changes a lot, depending on the team you have that year and what's going on in that part of the season. But typically, like, they're not going to feel their best around, this time of the year, let's say like February. But when March comes, like, you're going to feel the best you ever have.
Hmm. That's a
That's our goal.
tricky thing, man. That is a tricky balancing act, isn't it?
It is. It's very hard,
It's
especially
difficult.
for
Let me
sure.
ask you this. And I know Zeke is, for lack of a better term, obsessive over some of this stuff.
He's a
Like
mastermind with that stuff.
he gets
he's done it.
obsessive. Like and
He's
I
done it for
love that about
USA.
him. He's done it for USA, and he, like, the focalized peak is really, really important. So if we're all going to agree that the only thing that matters really is 3 days in March, how do you motivate these guys to get up for a dual meet? Because look, let's be honest, dual meets sell, man. It's a big
Yeah.
deal. Like, it's important. How do you get them up for Cliff Keen? How do you get them up for whatever? If we're all gonna really agree that there's nothing that matters except for 3 days in March.
Yeah. Well, some of them are getting closer to the end of their college career. So for them, it's like, it's not just about the last couple of days in March. It's about, you're going to have to beat these kids to make world teams. If you want to be an Olympian someday and you want to, make world teams once you get to that elite level, freestyle stuff, then you have to beat these guys anyway. So it's like creating that culture where, we value and we're obsessed with our technique and our tactics and our improvement. Like, we're constantly, and I can speak on behalf of all the guys here, like Zahid, Vincenzo, some of our freestyle guys, McGee, Courtney, Josh Shields, the senior, and I'd say like Colton Schultz. They lead that charge really of, you got to get better at wrestling every second. We're always trying to improve, evaluate, compete, improve, evaluate, compete, and just over and over, we just keep doing that cycle. And I think that's motivating in itself, because I know for sure I don't want to show up on Match Friday and wrestle Vincenzo, Josh Shields, Ja'Cory Teamer, Caleb Larkin, Kyle Parko, and not be focused or feel like, I got to fight today. Not just
right now.
Not just Vegas. Like, if I come in here with a bad attitude, I'm gonna have a crappy weekend. My weekend's gonna suck. So, like, I think, Mike, you gotta put someone in front of you. It's like, if you're a freestyle guy training to make a world team and you don't have a competition for a really long time, I like thinking about going to the training camp. Like, I'm gonna wrestle this guy and this guy when I'm at Colorado Springs at the training camp. We're going to do matches. I know I'm going to be competing with these guys. How can I work on executing in these positions when I get there? So that's like kind of a focus in front of me, an opponent, keep me motivated.
You mentioned a lot of big names there. Obviously, things aren't going to be fun on a Friday if you're not ready to wrestle with those guys. But how do you get some of the younger guys to buy in that maybe haven't gone through the process yet, maybe aren't, all the way, at the very top of the ladder there? How do you get them bought in to follow with the plan when it's, not very fun this time of year?
I think, like, we got to teach them. We got to have some of our senior level guys and seniors leadership on the team, keeping them along too, like making sure that no one gets lost in the cracks, because, everybody on this team has to do their job, and whatever their role is or whatever their job is, in terms of helping the team and helping their wrestling career, they have to be held accountable. So I think it starts with the freshmen holding each other accountable. And, we've got some great freshmen this year. Nico Ruiz, he's competed in some high-level tournaments already, and he wrestled really well. He's just, everything he does in terms of his training, lifestyle, school. Caleb Larkin's 4.0 in engineering. in like honors college, so these kids kind of lead themselves in some sense, but the recruiting's been pretty good the last 2 to 3 years. So I think bringing in the right recruits that are going to fit well in your culture, and then having the leadership in there to kind of guide them along. And then we're just consistent with the message that we preach around here. It's always, attitude plus technique equals scoring. And we're not going to get weird about it. It's going to be real lighthearted in the room, but we're going to have all the skills and leave no stone unturned. And everyone kind of buys into that system, and it's been good so far.
Yeah, it's fun to watch the consistency that you guys have had. Guys like Ja'Cory, how do you coach him? He would, let me tell you something. If he was in my room, I'd be like, don't do it. Oh, all right.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. No. Oh, all right. Yeah. Okay, good. How do you, because God knows that is as far away from your style of wrestling as you probably could get. So how do you, when you kind of talk to a guy like Ja'Cory Teamer, how do you go, all right, here's how you should really do it?
I think, one thing to Ja'Cory's credit that people probably underestimate a little bit is his wrestling IQ. I think his wrestling IQ is off the charts. He knows like every scenario, every position, and he can make instant decisions, thinking 10 moves ahead in 1 second. Because he's just really good at wrestling, right? Really cerebral, and he has like, we call it NFL speed around here. He's got that NFL speed. When you see this guy run across the track, like he takes he's barefoot too. He's running across the track, and we're doing like a 200-yard sprint. Good luck trying to beat him. He's just gas right across.
Yeah.
So I think like part of training him, is just making sure that he feels good and he's in a good headspace and his energy levels are good and he's training smart. I know after Vegas, that was really his first competition in a long time.
Yeah.
He hadn't competed. He didn't do any of the freestyle elite matches, all that stuff. Had a pretty substantial injury. And, he did great with the recovery, and he was the hardest he's trained all preseason. So we kind of just stepped back and let him go at that point. You just, a guy like Ja'Cory, you just make sure, he's staying on track and accountable with his weight, strength, and all that stuff. But he competed really well. And I think that was a fun finals match. I think, it was his I think he could out-wrestle that guy if they wrestled again. But Peyton did a good job. And I was excited because Ja'Cory was motivated after it too. It's like, and this is how the freshmen kind of jump levels fast because, say a guy like Nico Ruiz, he wants to wrestle with Ja'Cory all the time. He sees Ja'Cory go out there, execute some really nice stuff against Stanford in the semifinals. He loses, he's back in the room, and he's putting himself in the exact positions he got scored on, trying to figure it out. Like, dude, I don't want to get in that crackdown again, or I don't want to get rolling around here and this happens again. How do I fix it immediately? So these guys like Ja'Cory, and when they come into my mind, they're always solving the wrestling problems. And then on to the next thing. Then they're just on to the next tactic and move. Those guys are hard to beat.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to tell you, imparting that mindset in younger kids has been fun for me, right? Like
Good idea.
My son especially, he is not great in every, not that he's not great in every position. He's not great in a lot of positions. So finding like 10 minutes before practice and like talking to him about like, hey, you really struggled in this particular position this past weekend. I know that you have to go through a practice, like Shanneman and Myers are putting you through X, Y, and Z. But you have to find ways during practice or after practice or whatever to put yourself in the positions that you, for lack of a better term, suck at. Like you have to do it.
That's good. That's right.
It's really, really difficult for him to go, yeah, but I have practice. I'm like, yeah, I know. But if you suck at getting a leg, if you're getting ridden with legs,
That's right.
you have to find a way to do that. Now, that might not fit into the 90 minutes that Shannon and Myers are doing. So, but they don't want to hear that. I got to do extra work. So how do you have to talk to these freshmen about it, or is it just like monkey see, monkey do? Like, I see the better guys on the team doing this, I better do it.
No, we teach them. We got to teach all of them. That's why, like, when they first come in here, we have a pretty structured system. We'll do like an individual in the morning and say it's like 45 minutes of skills and drills with your weight class coach. Or maybe another day, it's like we're going to do a 10-minute chunk of tripod stand-up and a 20-minute chunk of ankle ride or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then another time we'll come bring him in with the individual, and then we'll do like film first, go through some positions, see this, see that, and then go drill it, and then go spar it, and then go wrestle it live, and kind of do it that way too. Just figuring out what works best for the kid. I know for me, it's like I got to get a lot of reps in there and work on timing. And then I've also got to just spar it, for an extended period, and then be able to do it in like short goes too. So it's like I've got a system where I try to learn the techniques and stuff, and get better at those positions as quickly as possible. Like you start dominating all the positions. And even if you're not scoring in them, if you just like focus on 100% defense and you just keep winning more and more of these positions, you start dominating wrestling.
Yeah, it's nice to. So I think of it as stacking skills. Like I just stack skills on top of one another. Not me personally anymore, but like for the kids especially, right? And so the more skills that you can stack on top of one another, well, you now become a far more rounded wrestler. Okay, I love the idea. I love getting a peek under the hood at processes. If you're taking a young athlete and teaching them something brand spanking new, like they have never been introduced to outside step, how much time, and I guess it depends on the athlete, but how much time are you actually teaching it versus sparring it versus wrestling it live?
I would say like maybe just in the beginning, maybe it's not even like with a partner, something just by themselves, like a footwork drill to kind of learn how to like split step, lunge jumps, split squats, all that kind of stuff. And then once you kind of do a good chunk of the penetration step, just keeping the setups like really basic, and then saying like, hey, let's just work on the finishing first, getting our hips in. Mm-hmm. Like you brought up outside step. My biggest thing with outside step is in and up. My number one goal is the second I fire outside step is to get Velcroed in, head up, chest up, hips in, shoulders back, and then immediately up. I wouldn't try to like shoot an outside step, not get my hips all the way glued in, and then try to go up. Then I'm going to miss takedowns from there. Mm-hmm. So just you can accomplish like 5-6 things by focusing on 1 or 2 things. I think that helps too when you're teaching it. So like saying less and just kind of keeping the cues a little bit more basic. Or I'm not above step-by-step either. I don't care how good you are at wrestling. Like having a step-by-step to learn something kind of is helpful sometimes too. But I like those ways. And man, just having the right partner too. Like you got to coach the partner up. He's got to give like passive resistance, and if I'm teaching like ankle ride, I'm like, hey, this is what the bottom guy's going to do. It's going to do A, B, C, D, E. And I want you to try really hard to do that because this drill's for you too. So you can figure out how to get out of ankle hook. So it's like, got to be a good partner. And 99% of the time they're solid, the defensive guys, but sometimes you got to coach them up. And I think just having more of a realistic feel there. Like, and then when you wrestle the live on those match Fridays, now you got to go execute. You drilled it, you slowed it down, you thought about it all week in your head. Now go execute without thinking about it.
Who's the toughest one in the room? I'm sorry, Joel, just the train of thought. Sorry. Who's the toughest one in the room to like, because I know there are kids in our room that will drill something all week, and when it's time to execute it in a live situation, they just want to win. So how do you get it across them? Like, hey, you might have to sacrifice a takedown or two in this wrestling room, but you got to get better at this position.
I know, it's so hard. It's almost like this first time you do it in the match, then it's like a real move. You know, it's not really a real move until like, bam, like outside step, lift them up, 4-point. All right, now I can actually do it.
Yeah.
But to get to that point, you know, because you always want to win, right? You don't want to like take a risk that's unnecessary that'll put you in, you know, a chance of losing. But at some point, you got to risk it for the biscuit.
I heard that.
You know,
How'd you arrive at this system of training? Is this something that you've picked up there at ASU, or is this something that you've kind of figured out along the way?
I mean, I've had like the best of the best coaching. I had 3 different national team coaches. Actually, Bruce Burnett, Bill Zadek, Zeke Jones. You know, I had great college coaches. I had some experience with other Olympians that are head coaches and work with them for a few years. So like, you know, kind of everything on my journey, I picked up a little bit here and there and added it to my system. And then, you know, some of the stuff that really worked for me in college and post-college, I kind of keep adding on to that and trying to make it better, more efficient, you know, just really just find the hardest way to do something the most efficient way as possible. You know, that's what Zeke always says to the kids. And it's true, you know, don't like drill your single leg just to finish it, you know, try to drill it the hardest possible way and practice and finish it perfectly. When you can get to that level, then you start winning a little bit more.
Efficiency.
Efficiency, that's a good word.
Yeah, I talk to these kids.
It's true.
About efficiency all the time, and it's like,
it's good.
It's hard for me to preach efficiency without preaching laziness, because they can get crossed on that sometimes.
That's right.
You know, and while I, you know, if you want something done quickly, you give it to a lazy person. I don't. Lazy is a 4-letter word in my house. You're just not going to be lazy ever.
I like that.
So, and that Russell, I mean, that goes for my wrestling room as well. Finding efficiency though in motion is very, very important. How do you convey efficiency through training, through technique? How do you convey that without preaching laziness?
I mean, this is kind of out there, but it's a good example that ties into what I'm trying to explain. So my brother, he's a commanding officer. He's going to be an admiral in like 5 months. And he was telling me one time, like, it's insane the amount of training that you need to become an admiral on this like destroyer ship, shoots these like armed missiles in the middle of the Mediterranean. You have to go through like the Naval Academy, Army, and then 4+ years, and then you do all the training in school. You have to become an engineer, you know, because you have to be able to basically fix every single component on the ship. You have to know how to fix everything if something breaks and how to compartmentalize it while still like leading the ship through battle, you know. So it's like the same thing with wrestling. If you're the captain of the ship and you're leading this destroyer, it's life or death out there. So you've got to know every single part of the ship inside and out. But then once you're navigating the ship, you got to be able to do it mindlessly and make good decisions in the present moment. But it's like
that's really tough.
It's really tough.
Really difficult.
I would say one thing, like, do it more outside of this is what I would tell them. Do it more outside of the room with your mind. It's not just like I can only wrestle for, you know, maybe 4 hours a day, and outside of that I can't be really on the mat much more. So I just, when I'm doing my cardio or I'm just, you know, in my everyday activities, I'm just daydreaming about my wrestling. I'm thinking about, you know, how I down blocked that head inside single and caught that underhook, and how I probably could have scored off it or something. What would I do differently? How could I like use what they scored on me today on them tomorrow to score, set traps?
Sure.
I love that part of it, you know. So they got to do it more in their mind and do the rehearsals and really know the details of their game. Like, they have to know what is their neutral strategy, what is their number one breakdown, What is their number one mat return? What is their go-to takedown? What is their, best pinning or turning combination? I mean, if you ask most kids, like, right, they'd have to think probably a little bit about it first, but the ones that are like pretty locked in, I mean, they know their system or plan or strategy in basically every position scenario.
Do you think coaches, because right now, I like the kids that I'm responsible for, I could tell you their go-to takedown if they're down by 1.
Yep.
I could tell you their go-to turn. I could tell you that, like, so coaches should know that too. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. I like that.
I mean, I think we get caught up as coaches. We get caught up in the big picture of winning wrestling matches far too often.
Yeah.
I think the improvement and effort is far more controllable, and if we can control those things, winning will take care of itself.
Yes, sir.
So when you talk to these kids, do you because you get high level athletes in that room and they're really, really competitive. Do you sometimes have to have them take a step back and go, hey, look, man, I know you want to win in every position, but you, especially coming in as a freshman, you ain't going to win every go in this room. You're like, there's just no way. Okay. Because Zahid's going to put a hole in you, right? Like he just
Yeah,
is.
he's good. He's
real
really good.
He's real good at wrestling.
Right.
So how do you talk to them and be like, look, you got to step away from this situation and just focus on improvement?
Yeah, I think, putting them sometimes like one-on-one with like a Zahid, and maybe he does kind of beat him up that day, but then afterwards having him like build him back up, like, all right, like, I exposed you here, but here's where you got to get better. I think that's powerful because, they're watching Zahid out there vaporizing people, and it's like, he knows what works. I think too, making them watch the film. Like, even if they don't want to sit there and watch it, I get it. I don't want to watch a match I just lost, especially if I like, sabotage myself and didn't wrestle good, or, just made some kind of excuse before I went out there and lost. But sit down and watch it, and also, like, I think taking notes on it. We give out like a wrestling journal, and it has like mindset stuff, and it also has wrestling related stuff in it. So like when Mike comes in the preseason, it's a little bit more laid back. So each week we're working on like one segment. It's like, say, energy management. And then we have like a whole thing where we're writing out like specific strategies that we're going to implement on competition day to manage our energy. We teach them techniques. We bring in specialists that do breath work, and we teach them the value of like how breathing is going to help you manage energy on competition day leading up to the week of competition. So it's just elite level programming, and it's creating a culture where the sports performance is really valued too. Like they see the gain in it, like, and they do, they buy into this stuff because they see the best of the best winning, and even these guys are super humble, talking about how they need to improve mentally, and like kind of just lost my head a little bit there, but I'm in the right state of mind now. So you listen to the interviews too. If you're just a kid out there, you go listen to the best people in the world winning the hardest tournaments and see what they're saying. You don't need to rewrite the wheel. You can take bits and pieces and kind of measure what you're doing against, kind of some of the things they're saying, if it's in the same ballpark, or if there's something that can make yours better. So, there's a lot of different programming that goes behind it. And I think, some of it is like actually writing stuff down. Some of it is doing visualization activities, and then some of it's more hands-on, and some of it's like subliminal too. We do different kinds of goal setting stuff where, it's almost like a subliminal message where I see this goal over and over and over again. It's like, even though you don't even know you're reading it, like your mind is connecting the dots for you, and you wake up with it in the morning and you go to bed with it at night. It doesn't even matter what happens in the middle of the day. This goal is just right there every day. Never lose sight of it. So I think one thing that in the training that should show too is the closer we get to the hardest competition, it shouldn't be the more nervous we get, because a lot of our training is to balance that for the front end of it. But the closer we get to competition, not the more nervous we get, the more focused we get and the more relaxed we get and excited. Like, wow, it's finally time.
Frank, was that your experience as an athlete?
That's yeah. I mean, that was when I won, or that's my best.
When I did well.
But I could say, like, the guys on this team, I watched Colton Schultz, like, they didn't even have him ranked in the beginning of the year. He was in the semifinals, took fourth that year. He wasn't even ranked, so it's like the kids believe it and they believe in the training because, we keep it pretty, we inform them on most of it. Like, this is how you're supposed to feel now. This is the training phase. And every once in a while, like, hit them with some mental warfare. They don't know what the hell's going on. Just toughen them up more. But I think the kids believe in it, Mike, when, like, they know that you have a plan and what phase they're going to versus, like, if you're in a training phase where it just feels like they're beating me down every day. Like, is this beneficial for me to be beaten to death every single day? Or should I beat them down, let them feel good, build them back up, So it is a balance. I think less is more because we compete so much already, especially in season. Like, you only have limited amount of days where you can toughen them up and run a really hard practice, so man, you just gotta make good use when you have that downtime. Right now is great because we have 2-week training cycle before we go to Midland. So there's a good time if you're like a college guy. You should be making gains right now. You shouldn't be worried about your weight and this and that and who you're wrestling next weekend. You should be in here trying to fix the wrestling problems before you're just doing weight control and competing again.
It's funny. One of the athletes last year was like, yeah, man, I was getting your legs. I was scoring on you, and now I just can't get. I'm like, were you getting my legs and scoring on me more when it was closer to the biggest competition of the year? He's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, you don't say.
That's good.
Any correlation there? No? All right. Well, you might want to think about that. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Joel, go ahead, brother.
How many of the kids and maybe even senior level athletes that are coming in are already kind of like doing the right things when it comes to, mindset and journaling and lifestyle versus kind of how many have to be taught that?
I think in my experience, we've had stuff like camps here at Sun Devil camps. We did like some elite camps, and we try to teach the kids at the camps too. Maybe it's like you give them the journal or have them bring a journal and just kind of have some like sessions where you teach them like, what's some stuff I should be journaling, how is this going to benefit me? That kind of like, what is the value in this? Blah, blah, blah. So I think you can start really young. Ultimately, like, I'd like where we have a system here where we have the Sunkiss Kids Wrestling Club. So you got like kids that are basically like can walk, like they're wrestling, 6 and under. And then you have like an elite elementary group that comes in here, and these kids like evolve into that where they compete, learn moves. Maybe they just do minimum competition, and then it keeps leveling up, and then eventually you can go to a private school. If you really love wrestling, a charter school like Valiant or something like, Blair Academy, you want to go take that route. And then you have the RTCs all around. So now you have an RTC model where you can train with Olympic gold medalists, shoulder to shoulder with you. And then you have the college where you can come win like trophies and national championships. And like some of these kids want to become fighters, they can go train at Fight Ready and go be fighters. So I think you just have a system, and everyone's kind of on the same page. We all want to just be the best out here on the West Coast and just dominate and have elite level people fighting and winning championships out here and world and Olympic gold medals. And I know that like Forrest, she might go into fighting. So there's an example of someone like comes and helps the program, helps the youth wrestling. She's helping the younger guys. She's helping the college guys. She's having success in freestyle and Olympic style, and then she goes on in fighting. So there's like a good wrestling ecosystem, and everyone's everyone's like trying to share information. They're very generous about passing it along to one another because ultimately we're all helping each other in some way. Like you could be helping that kid, but at Sunkist kid's 5 years old, but this kid could be fighting someday at Fight Ready. We don't know, it's all
Sure. There's a lot of things that you are excelling at. In the you're welcome. I don't think it I'm not just complimenting for the sake of it, but here's the truth of it. What about coaching at that level surprised you? Like what were you just not really ready for?
That's a good question. Maybe you kind of think it'd be easier a little bit at first, but I'd say that there's just a lot of good coaches out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of super motivated, highly ambitious, obsessed wrestlers out there who've been doing it for decades. The ones that are doing it for decades with the right mentality and mindset, they've had a ton of success too. So it's just like kind of being humble and making sure that I never miss an opportunity to learn from somebody else. Maybe early on you kind of think like, this is how I'm going to do everything. But then you're like, nah, that's not. Like, I got to take a step back here. Like, you got to have a better strategy. So, yeah, I think it's that's my kind of observation is like, there's a lot of good programs now. And, what some programs lack in resources, they do like still perform well. It's just maybe not on the same kind of scale, 5-6 guys, but
yeah.
You could see the results even at the small program. So it's good to see that like the entire college landscape is getting better as a whole too.
I agree with that. Well, then if that's true, and I think it is, right? I think it's exponentially more difficult to crack the top 10 now than it was
That's right.
20 years ago. Okay. How is it that Kale is staying on top? I mean, honestly, like if we just agreed that fighting to get into the top 10 is far more difficult than ever, that means that fighting to get to the top spot has to be even more difficult than that. And everyone is hyper motivated, hyper informed, right? Like these are well informed. How are they staying on top? It's crazy.
Well, the most basic answer is they're scoring the most points at the NCAA tournament.
That's true.
I would say like if you looked at how many bonus points they score, I would probably say like at least a whole nother finalist plus. So however many points it is for a finalist.
25 more points.
Yeah. I would say on top of their like points earned for advancement and placement per athlete, they're over an entire first place finisher.
Holy smokes. I never thought about that. So that's like having an extra champion on your team.
Yeah, basically. It's like having an extra person worth of bonus points. So I think like, one thing that Zeke talks about all the time is scoring points, and I'd say that so far this season, like we feel like we haven't scored enough points. Our best guys, our offense hasn't been there yet, but once we have like our full lineup and everybody is out there pretty soon, I think we're going to see him score more points. So like, instead of focusing on winning, that's like, that just crushes me. It drains all my energy. It's just a waste. It's stupid to just obsess about that. Obsess about scoring points, and I think that'll make the wrestling better too. So.
Okay. That's fair. Well, I don't know. I guess.
Oh no! Back to the Kale thing.
No, that's fine. I mean, look, like that is honest though, right? Like you got to score points, and focusing just simply on winning is exhausting. It is exhausting, and it is really kind of a fruitless effort.
And I would say like that's something that he practiced, not just preached as a competitor. Before David and before all those guys, he was a prolific scorer. He was as efficient as possible, took down some like real tough wrestlers, always like takedown machine. Yeah. He was a takedown machine. all the way to the Olympics and won the Olympics. So I think like if you want to win national titles, you have to be insanely deliberate. You have to take complete ownership of it. Like you can't have any plan B that, if this works out, if that works out. Like, no. You have to have the plan in the head and then you have to execute. So it's really hard. I think the first step is like, it's the recruiting, right? You got to get the guys first that have that mindset and mentality and they're in the ballpark of talent and skill. And then you have to have the culture. And then eventually, like in a perfect world, you have 4 guys that can make the finals and then 1 or 2 of those guys wins. That's a national championship team.
Yeah.
So like, I know Coach Zeke he's thinking 8 years at, I don't know how many years he's thinking ahead, but it's probably a lot. So you're looking down the road and you're saying, well, man, this guy he's redshirting this year, but like this guy could win multiple titles. This guy wrestled so-and-so and he's in a 1-point match and almost beat him first match. He could be so you have the guys, we have the guys here now where I think like they continue to develop. They stay healthy, God willing, they stay healthy, everything continues to progress. Then it's just going to get harder, especially with NIL. I can't speak for Kale, but I'm sure he's not like thrilled about it. I'm sure he doesn't love like kind of, what direction it's taken. I don't know. He might. Who knows? He might. But I think that could affect it too, right? Like if somebody is, really taking full advantage of this program or something, this NIL, could that make it harder to win national championships?
Sure.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, it's still kind of early.
Jury's out, right? Jury's out because it's still real young and fresh, and it's the wild, wild west right now, as far as I'm concerned. You take that.
It's still too early. That's right. But it's crazy. It does make a difference for sure.
Oh, yeah. And if you're not paying attention to it, you are going to get passed up real quick. So, I think we had Pat Pablizio on not too long ago, and he said, look, you can develop athletes. Mike Machiavelli is a great example. That is a development in work, right? Like, he did not come out of high school as a blue chip recruit. He was developed in that wrestling room, won a national title, and the rest is history, right? But that will get you in the top 4, right? That'll get you a trophy. Actually, now 4 doesn't get you a trophy, top 3, right? That'll get you somewhere around there. But if you want to win it, you got to develop freshmen that can win it. Like,
that's right.
That's really tough, dude. That's really, really tough. So how do you take a kid that's a blue chip recruit who you get blue chip recruits at ASU? For sure you do. It's not like you're Bloomsburg and you're fighting for, guys that could get on the medal stand. You have the A1 recruits. How do you get them to win national titles as freshmen? That's tough, dude.
Yeah, it is. Like, I think when they talk about, once I get this amount of matches, you just tell them right away, like, you can win right now. You don't have to wait until another year passes or you redshirt. I heard some kid talking the other day, and he was saying, oh, yeah, once next season, no, forget about next season. Like, you got to figure this out right now, and I think you got to make the kids believe that if they hit all the markers too, like, if you go to Vegas and you win, that's a good marker. Like, wow, I just beat some really good guys, high level tournament, had my first one, I didn't have 10 practice matches, then all of a sudden, like, you wrestle a top 10 guy and you just smash them. You take them down like 3-4 times. So it's a progression too. Sometimes, like, it might just be one win and you just like flip that switch. You like survive a heater and you break this guy. He's really good. And then you just feel like you could take over the world, but someone like Nico Megaludis, he might took some hard losses in the beginning of the season his freshman year.
Yeah.
But then, like, dude, we needed him. Like, we needed him to perform well, to place high. And he became a finalist. And he got through, like, an extremely hard road. He won in, like, the ultimate ride out, one match. He beat, like 5 really accomplished wrestlers in the tournament. And he lost like in overtime, I think, against McDonough.
Mhm.
So that was just an example of like just like the sheer will of I'm gonna figure it out no matter what. Like that obsession like drove him to probably level up, 2 years worth in 1 year because
That's great.
he wanted it bad enough. That's
Yeah.
why. I mean, that's why he did it, right? He did it because he wanted it that bad. Like the kids gotta want it, they don't have to do it. They don't have to be national champions. They don't have to have a really good season. Like they gotta want it. So
Mm.
at the end of the day, like, we make sure we preach that to them too. It's like, yeah,
You better want this. You better want all of it.
And you got to be grateful for it too.
Yeah.
You're lucky that you get to do this. Like I try to think wrestling more as a craft, because I'm super obsessive too. So it's more of a craft, and I'm trying to like reach this point of mastery where I can like execute all these details and skills and strategies, to a T, where success is just like I win and then it's like, what's next? What's next? And then you can never live up to it. It's always like the next best thing, so you flip the switch and you have more of a craft, mindset. And then you're constantly kind of focusing on your craft. And then when you get closer to competition, you just sharpen those skills like a blade. And I don't try to focus too much on the outcome with the guys because they all want to win bad, but
Sure.
they have to understand that a lot of that pressure comes from it doesn't even really exist. Like you think everyone cares so much. Yeah. Like, oh man, if I lose this match, like everyone's going to care so much. Like, no, like my mom's got problems. Like she's got stuff she's worrying about tomorrow too. She ain't worried about my loss. Coach ain't either, but in that moment you feel that. So it's like, you got to remind yourself that none of the failure is permanent, that there's no finish line really. You're just constantly like trying to be more efficient and better at your craft.
Love it. Love it. God, that's great. We're going to use that as a clip. That's for sure. That's awesome. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Let's get some quick questions out of you and we'll get you moving along on your day. All right.
I gotta catch my flight in a couple hours.
All right. Good. Are you going to Fort Worth?
Yeah, it's a lot of wrestling this morning. I wrestle at Shields, Big E, and now me and you are chiming it up some wrestling. That's good though.
That's good.
It's a good day.
That's a good day. That's a good day.
That's a good day.
All right. So number one, first out the gate, how are you feeling about the 3-point takedown as of right now?
As of right now, I think it's been kind of fun. I feel like we've always been a pretty neutral, dominant team in terms we like to be on our feet. And, so there's a lot of incentive now. 3 points. And no one's ever out of a match. Kid out there, like, yo, if you give up 4 back points, so what? Like, don't put your head in the sand and give up, because you can stand up and on the flip side of it too, it's like you could be on your feet and give up like 2 stall calls. I'm not advising that, but these matches are different. You're never out of a match. So I like the fact that you could like see some comebacks, but I don't know, like someone said there's more upsets, but I don't know if there is or isn't. There's always a good bit of upsets in the beginning of the season.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay. Your favorite wrestling shoe of all time?
I would say the Ultra Tex, the ASIC Ultra Tex.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I like that. All right. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about the sport of wrestling, what would it be?
I would say 1-point push out and continuation in folk style.
Yes. Just give me a step out. It's so much easier.
Please.
It's so much easier. It's black and white. It is very simple.
Mike, it's hard too. There's so much technique for a push out. Like,
oh, sure.
It's not like it's like, oh, we're just sumo wrestling. Like, no. You try to do that, you'll get forward.
You get smashed for sure. Yep. Love it. Give me a step out rule in folk style immediately. It helps the flow of a match, right? Like nobody talks about that. Like they go out of bounds. Look, it's a process to get back to the same. It's a big old pain in the butt. I love that. That's a great one. Okay, who is on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling? 4 people.
I don't know. That's a tough one.
I'm going to hold you to this. We got 8 minutes for you to sit there in silence and toil over it.
It's just like some of them are still current, so they can't go up there yet.
Okay.
I would say, I'll give you one for sure. One for sure, I would say Jordan Burroughs.
JB.
I mean, the guy is just like, he never gives up, right? Like he was like no freestyle, not much freestyle experience growing up. Not like the typical traditional, like went to this club, I had Mike coaching me and all these like really good level coaches at a young level. None of that. And then wins the worlds when he's still in college.
Amazing.
Right. Has an amazing tournament too. Beats like the hardest, some of the best wrestlers from Russia of all time.
Yeah, for sure.
And then did that for like, a whole decade, just kept doing it over.
Is all?
Just over and over and over and over again. And like, I like the way he does it too. I think that's what puts him up there in my list because he never misses a training camp, never misses a practice. He never complains. He's just a hard worker. He's an animal, and he's brutally tough. Oh, yeah. So, that, and I value that he's up there.
All right, so JB.
JB's up there. Who else? I put Zeke and Kale up there.
Okay, Zeke.
Just because
Kale. That is Zeke's first appearance on a Rushmore, I believe. Go ahead.
I would say like the progression that we had from when he took over as a national team coach was probably, second to none because nobody even had the RTC models, and he helped implement and transition to that model. And from an athlete, that's like part of the reason why I won the nationals. I trained with Tion Ware, and then boom, and then I'm like making world teams right after college. I was like one of the first people to benefit from that system. So I really liked how he brought that RTC model. And then we had 2 Olympic gold medalists from like a point where we weren't winning anything at that point.
Oh, Frankie.
It was bad.
Frankie, 2010, getting up in the middle of the night. Not fun.
Dude,
not fun.
Not fun. Like just hoping for a medal. So like,
come on.
You go from that to executing, you implement the RTC model, and then boom, boom, boom. Now you see like kids that like were products, these Kyle Snyders that were like products of these RTC
100%.
models who are just freaking animals. And maybe you put Kyle Snyder up there right now too. Because like I said, like there's some of them that aren't done yet, So
right.
It's hard to say who goes ahead of who. But Kyle Snyder, he like JB has been rock solid for the sport of wrestling.
Just constant, just consistent.
Which goes to show you that and Zeke says this all the time. What wins at the highest level is character, high character. So how do you train the best elite level athlete in the world? Yeah, you got to teach him the skills, but he has to have high character. High character wins at the highest level. Kyle Snyder, he won the worlds. He broke Sadulayev in that match, and won the world championship against one of the best wrestlers of all time, Sadulayev. He could be. I'd probably have to say, the way he's like innovated wrestling, he might be up there too. Him and Kyle could just face each other.
Yeah.
Like face to face on that Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, that'd be good. Listen,
is that okay?
Yeah, you can't say enough about.
They can't be side by side.
No. Yeah, but you can't say enough about Sadulayev. Like I've never seen somebody as good from every single position, every single one. Like he doesn't have a bad position. Like he's good on bottom. Like we didn't even know he was good on bottom because he never got taken down.
That's right.
And then you're like, oh crap, this dude can stop a gnarly gut. Like he can stop. Like anyway, I digress.
I'm also like impressed by like the quality of opponents they beat too. Like, and this, like, that's one thing I'll say. Like Zeke had to get through Valentin Jordanov, and he's one of the best wrestlers of all time. That's who he lost to for gold. Beat him in the world championship. So like, in order to have that kind of wrestling IQ and experience to beat an opponent like that, that's another thing I look at too. Like, look at the guys that some of these Olympic gold medalists we have had to get through.
For sure.
The guys
Frankie, we got to get moving here. I'm sorry. I'm going to cut you off. We got to get moving here. We have another podcast to get to. Thank you so much for carving out an hour for us, man. I really do appreciate it. If there's any way that people want to get a hold of you on Instagram, where do they get a hold of you?
Just Instagram at Gorilla Hulk.
G Hulk. I love it.
Yeah.
Frankie, thank you so much for coming on. We'll talk to you soon. All right, brother?
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.